Hello and welcome to episode 23 of On Liberty, coming to you live from the Centre for Independent Studies in Sydney, Australia. I'm your host, Salvatore Babonis, and joining me today is Greg Lindsay AO, founder of the Centre for Independent Studies. I'll be talking to Greg about how he parlayed a timeless idea, in the words of Friedrich Hayek, quote, to make the philosophic foundations of a free society once more a living intellectual issue, into Australia's most important think tank. Greg Lindsay, how are you?
I just find, Salvatore, it's good to be involved in this.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you involved in this. And the one thing I want to know, and that really I find so daunting to think about, what led you to leave a comfortable position as a mathematics teacher to become an intellectual entrepreneur?
Well, I was a child of the 60s, and in that era, it was a time when people of my age anyway were driven to think about the way the world was working and whether it was satisfactory. Australia had one government, at least one party in government for 23 years, and I wondered if a lot of what they were doing was, in fact, how it ought to be. I went to university originally to study agriculture, and that didn't quite work out, so I ended up being a math teacher, and even then, whilst I enjoyed teaching, there were other things in my mind, and I came up with this particular idea for an institution that could marshal people and ideas to support the sorts of things I thought were important. And 40 odd years later, well, we're here.
Well, let me say a quick hello, Elizabeth, Christopher, Gay, Stephen, Courtney, a lot of them sending good wishes to you. I was interested to hear you say that you originally were wanting to go into agriculture. I know you're on the farm right now. It took you a while to get back there. But those are two risky careers, agriculture and think tanks. So how is it possible that you made a success of running a think tank? I mean, how do you raise the money? How did you get started?
Well, I at the end of 1975, which was when the Whitlam era in politics in Australia, which Whitlam government was elected in 1972, that era was a period of turmoil and change. A lot of it good, a lot of it I thought was a bit, there must be a better way, I thought. And in any case, I started teaching in 1975, went to the United States actually to visit friends in our school holidays that year, and I'd also been writing to people who were involved in think tanks. And at that stage, I was thinking of starting a school, actually, a private school.
Oh, okay.
But once I sort of looked at this the world, I thought maybe the palette that I was going to paint on was rather larger, and then I started thinking it through. And by 1976. I'd sort of formulated what I wanted to do, and but I was still teaching. I enjoyed teaching, but this thing was taking over my life.
Right. Now we have well wishes from Anthony as well. I've heard stories from colleagues here at the Center for Independent Studies about this mythical space above Uncle Pete's Toys in St Leonards that they've actually been to. But was there really a shed in Pennant Hills?
There was really a shed in Pennant Hills. I was living there at the time with a couple of friends who are still friends. In fact, they were living in the United States until recently, and after many years, and they've moved back to Sydney. So we've seen them since they've been back, and they're married. And the shed was in the backyard. And so when you start an institution, you need an office, don't you? So it was a little two-room shed, which we did up a bit, and that's from between 1976 and 1980 when we moved to Uncle Pete's. That was our office.
Now, I'm really intrigued by this because, of course, you started that business in a shed at the same time that Bill Gates started not Bill Gates, that Bill Gates started a business, but also that Apple was started in a garage in Cupertino. I mean, they, of course, became billionaires from their shed garage businesses, but there's no upside to being an intellectual entrepreneur, to being in the think tank world. So, I mean, how did you justify taking that risk that you're leaving a paying job to go into something that is very chancy, but doesn't have any big monetary payoff like starting your own company could have?
Well, most people who start companies don't succeed. So that's one thing. Actually, the other outfit that started in the shed, I think, was Hewlett Packard. So
right, the first one.
But anyway, when you're young, and I was 26 when I started CIS. There are things you just got to do, and you know, I had an entrepreneurial flair. I tended to start things. I was able to get people to work with me, persuade them of what I wanted to do, and they said, okay, we'll back it. And as you asked a question about earlier about raising money, well, I had none. I sort of prevailed on a few friends at the time, and at the time I made more friends, and I was able to persuade them this was a good idea, and they agreed with me.
You know, I'm really kind of amazed because I hadn't done the arithmetic. Obviously, you're not 150 years old now, which means if you started CIS more than 40 years ago, you must have been pretty young. But 26, I mean, at 26 years old, you were asking people to give you money to start this intellectual endeavor. You were meeting people like, you know, Milton Friedman and, you know, Nobel Prize winning economists. I mean, that must have been really strange.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I was working, and it was growing to the point where we had a couple of conferences that got quite successful. They were successful. There was one in 1978 at Macquarie University where I'd been a student because I went back to university to do something other than mathematics. And we ran this conference, and the then economics editor of the Financial Review, Paddy McGuinness, who until he passed away remained a lifelong friend, wrote an amazing article with the headline in the full-page article in the paper called "Where Friedman is a Pinko," and why that would take too long to explain. But the fact of the matter was, it's got a lot of attention, and when I got the attention, I started to get people contacting me. I mean, I was sharing this house, as I said, in Pennant Hills, and I went off to work to teaching, and then the phone started ringing because Paddy had put the phone number in the article, and one of my friends was living there. She until she had to go to work, and she was a teacher as well, took an hour of phone calls until she had to go. So,
oh, wow.
But then, you know, it took a while, and by the end of '78, I realised that it was growing to a point that I needed to focus my attention on it full time. So I took leave without pay from my job for 12 months as a teacher. And by the end of that, this was during '79, by the end of that year, we got enough money to pay me. Not very much, but, you know, not like Bill Gates or Apple or anyone like that, but it was enough to sort of say there's a bit of institutional strength here. The other key thing was that my wife, Jenny, and we've been married for a long time, she entered the scene then, and she was working. So that helped, honestly, as well as support from some key individuals.
Right. Well, I mean, I'd really love to get Jenny on this program in a future episode, so I'll talk to the producers about that. I'm sure we get fantastic stories out of her. Look, who are some of those early intellectual leaders you brought to Australia to speak at CIS?
Well, the important thing too is to realise that there were some in Australia who were also important, and most of them didn't have a sort of home to go to publish or to speak and so forth. And I felt one of the early successes at the time was giving these people a home. Right. And, you know, I could give you a list, but that would take a long time. As the organisation grew, we moved to from Pennant Hills in 1980 to the office above Uncle Pete's Toys. And Peter Piggott, who owned it, and Neville Kennard, his partner, who was my then chairman, were able to find me some space to have our office. The early days of bringing people out, yes, we did. Whilst we didn't bring Milton Friedman out initially, he had been to Australia in 1975 and came again in 1983, I think, or was it 81 anyway. And we held an event which was, you know, you can imagine, attended, and that's also introduced me, or I'd already been involved with an international organisation of which Friedman and Hayek and others were members, called the Macquarie Society, and that organisation was a very critical thing, at least personally and professionally, in introducing ideas and people to me. And I was still teaching. I went to my first meeting in 1978 in Hong Kong. Probably can't do it these days. And the headmaster of my school was an economist, and when he saw the program, which included Nobel laureates, like there were 4, I think, on the program, he said, "Yeah, you better go," and he gave me the time off. So that was a critical thing, and has been ever since.
Now, how did you get so involved? Because you've been, is it president or chairman of the Mount Pelerin Society?
Yeah,
in the past, and
I was elected president in 2006 in Guatemala, and the position is a 2-year thing, and I relinquished it to Deepak Lal, the British Indian economist, in 2008 in Tokyo.
We're talking Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, Deepak Lal, Greg Lindsay in the same breath. You must be the only Australian, I'm guessing, who's ever served as president of Mount Pelerin.
Not really, actually. There were 2 other Australians, both of whom worked overseas for most of their lives, but always maintained their Australian citizenship. Or one was Max Harpel, the economic historian, who actually wrote the history of the society, and the other was the great political theorist Ken Minogue. Whilst Ken was born in New Zealand, he came to Australia as a teenager and did all his education here, and then taught at the London School of Economics for most of his life.
Right. Now, there are other think tanks in the world, and certainly in Australia. Some of them have, mega funding from one big donor who gives them money. I've really been impressed with CIS even before I got involved with it, that it's a scrappy think tank that seems to, that does not take government funds, but also doesn't have one billionaire who just writes a check to fund it. I mean, how did you turn CIS from this little operation above a storefront into, one of the major voices in Australian policy debates?
Funding thing is always a puzzle to a lot of outsiders. You're quite right. We didn't have any billionaires pouring in cash. We didn't have the government pouring in cash, but we certainly had a lot of individuals who were passionate about the ideas and were willing to kick in some support. But we also wanted to be totally independent of our supporters. Now, people who contribute to the organisation do it on an untied basis. We don't do any commission work for anybody. We certainly, if there was an issue we wanted to pursue, we weren't shy of trying to find people who might want to support it. But if we weren't independent, then the value of the work may be compromised. And frankly, in the 40-odd years that CIS has been going, no one, except those that really don't like us very much, no one has questioned the quality of the work. And, it's not only a matter of just writing a paper and publishing it, it goes through quite a process. As anyone who's written, probably even including you, realises that we want to make sure that every T is I's dotted and references are checked and so forth. So the independence both from the support base and those who are involved in terms of producing the quality that we need was critical to the survival of the organisation.
Right. Well, it is called the Center for Independent Studies for a reason. And frankly, I didn't realize that when I first got involved. It's really rare for a think tank to be independent of a major sponsor and of government support. I mean, I can't really think of any in Australia that are independent other than CIS. Is it that independence that you think makes CIS an important think tank? That is, why does Australia need CIS when it has all these other think tanks as well?
I think that's exactly right, because we can speak without fear or favour, because we're not going to, if the billionaire doesn't like what you're doing, he or she might go off somewhere else. Well, that's not the position I ever wanted to be in. I mean, frankly, if a billionaire wanted to give us some money, I'm sure CIS would take it, but under the same rules as anybody else, because one of the things that organisations like this are always under pressure for is support. I mean, we don't have the taxpayer funding us. We have to compete in the market for good minds. I mean, the key to the organisation is good people writing good stuff, but they have to have a career. You know, some might only want to work for a little while, and that often happens, but others we've been able to give a lengthy career period time to, and that's one of the critical things about the building that institutional gravitas that we need. So.
Now, regular viewers of this show will know that I'm a big fan of Bruce Smith's Liberty and Liberalism. I'm going to confront you with a quote from this, but first just tell us, how did this book come to be published by the Center for Independent Studies, or republished?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I went back to university and I was studying philosophy, and I was just going through the library at the university at Macquarie, whenever it was, and I came across this leather-bound, I think it was leather-bound, anyway, old book by Bruce Smith called Liberty and Liberalism, and then I looked inside it, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was signed T.H. Cooley. Now, Tom Cooley, we knew quite well. In fact, he had for a short period was on our advisory council. He was a historian of the Australian welfare system, really, but he was an old-fashioned liberal in the sense that we're talking about here, at least in the sense that Bruce Smith is. So I thought, that's interesting. So as we got larger, there came a point, I always had this idea of reprinting classics that no one ever saw. We printed an essay by a philosopher at Sydney University, John Anderson, called The Servile State, not across the Hilaire Belloc one, but he wrote this little essay and I got permission to publish that. Then the Bruce Smith one, when we got to the point where we could do it, we started scanning it, and then we found out that the Liberty Fund in America had already got some of the text and it was available online, so we were able to not shortcut things completely. Smith was an unusual guy. He was a politician, he was a businessman, and obviously he could write. He was a follower of particularly the British liberals like Spencer and John Stuart Mill and so forth. So, and I thought it was important to get it back into print. We did.
Well, I'm going to read you a quote. I'm not going to read it from the book, so I'm not wearing my reading glasses. I'll read it from my printout. On page 169, Smith says that in true liberalism, all men are equal, not in wealth or position or ability, but, and he emphasizes this, in the eye of the law. Is that what true liberalism means to you?
Yep. I couldn't say better than Smith.
And what does that mean for CIS? I mean, when you set CIS out on this course to be a liberal think tank, people often say, does that mean a libertarian think tank? Does that mean a liberal party think tank? What does truly liberal mean for you?
Well, look, back when I was thinking about these things at that formative stage, I was certainly influenced by the American libertarians and the Austrian School of Economics, which is where Paddy McGuinness got that, because the Austrians think that Milton Friedman, this is Hayek and others, that Friedman was an interventionist. You see, that's why Friedman is a pinko. Although maybe you understand the pinko term. That's by the way. Anyway, so that yes, that libertarian thinking certainly had influence on me then. By the time went on, I started to read and become rather familiar with some of the broader classical liberal. People tend to use that now to say confusing with Liberal Party or American liberals, like, well, nobody liberal that I know, and so on. So the true liberal, as described by Smith, would be the sort of, look, CIS are not especially dogmatic, at least, I mean, I'm not the boss anymore, so, maybe I'm taking liberties here, but the way I set it up is not going to be dogmatic. He wants to test things and argue things. I mean, in a true liberal society, there are important institutions, and the rule of law, as Smith was saying there, is one of the key ones, being equal before the law, but there are other things too, private property and so forth. And, the way people behave, is not the responsibility of the state or anyone else to tell them how to do it. But what we want to be able to do is have a society where people can do the things they want, look after the people they're responsible for, which is family. So CIS will do a lot of work on the family, and about the importance of civil society, the sort of little platoons that Edmund Burke and subsequently Charles Murray have called, about how we deal with problems ourselves rather than having to resort to the state to do it. That's the sort of society I think is a healthy one. And whilst there are certainly functions for the state at the moment, well, maybe the moment's not a bad time, it's not a good time to talk about, but there are too many things the state is doing which we should examine carefully, and I guess that's what we were doing all this time.
Right. Now, we're about to go to questions, but I regular viewers will know that I can't hold a copy of Liberty and Liberalism in my hands without trying to give it away. So if you are considering becoming a member of the Center for Independent Studies, please do consider the $250 membership level, at which I will send you a personally signed copy of Liberty and Liberalism. Of course, we'd also love to have you as a $40 basic member. If you're already a basic member and you want to go to that $250 support level, just let them know you did it because of this pitch, and I will, again, send you a signed copy of Liberty and Liberalism that's signed by me, not signed by Bruce Smith, who sadly is no longer signing books. We're also just approaching 25,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. Having subscribers does really help us get more viewers. So essentially, more subscribers means YouTube knows we're popular and it feeds our videos to more people, not just to you, but to other people as well. So if you're not already a subscriber, please do subscribe. Hit the like button on the video. I see we have some 50 people watching at this very moment, but only 11 have so far liked the video. If you like the video, please do click the like button, thumbs up, and give us your support there. Most of all, thank you to our existing members who are here supporting the show. It really makes a difference for everyone here at the Center for Independent Studies. I'm going to go to questions now. Anthony is asking us, Greg, was the teaching profession as leftist in political orientation as it is today back when you were teaching in the 1970s?
Interesting question. I'd say no, but then again, I taught in the mathematics department, and there's not a hotbed of radical whatever in that department. Having said that, I think the union representative was in my staff room, and he and I got on fine, even though I wasn't a member of the union. So the short answer is, I don't think it's as good as it once was. You think about when you went back to school, back to your own school days, and someone of my age, I can't remember a teacher ever having a political view that it was passed across to the kids in the classes. So from 75 to 78 to now, I think things have changed. Most people aren't radical; they just want to do their job. Right. But the trouble is, there are others there who have other views of how things ought to be, and they can often overtake the professionalism of others who just want to just do their job. And because it's highly unionised and so forth, and it was perhaps less of an issue here because of the large number of private schools we have, but in the United States, the teachers' unions overwhelmingly can have a big political influence on particularly the Democrat Party. So,
right now, Adrian is watching. He says it's great to see you. He was introduced to you in the early 1980s by board members of the company where he worked. He wasn't sure what the CIS was all about, but he appreciated your passion. Well, Adrian, I hope you will. I hope you're already a member, and if you're not, please do join us now. You can find all about what the CIS is all about.
I know who Adrian is, and I'm glad that we see him at CIS events every now and then. And he was a good contact back in that period, and in other roles I've seen him since. So, and I'm glad he's still interested.
Now, Suresh was disappointed in the poor quality of video coming from you out on the farm, and he wants to ask, can Australia cope with the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution when it has such poor internet connectivity?
Look, I think people have to be patient with the quality of the internet from where I am. We do not have broadband. We do not have NBN broadband. It comes from a satellite called The Sky Muster Satellite. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, which of course is a terrific book by Mick Waite and the other guy. Yes, it's a key for Australia, for a country of our size, for us to be a key player in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It would be nice if we could do better on the internet. I happen to think that the NBN model is not a good one. I think that if the government was keen to get it going, then they should have got the private sector much earlier than they're likely to, and we'd have a better result. But it is what it is. Certainly, through the lockdown period, for people where we are, it's been a boon. Now, not everyone. I mean, if I went 10 kilometres down the road, I could probably have a cable. But where I am at the moment, I can't.
That reminds me, let me throw in a question. What do you think of Klaus Robb at the World Economic Forum? And he's been a big promoter of Fourth Industrial Revolution and the whole Davos idea.
Davos has had a lot of criticism, and I don't think it is attuned to the mindset of the individual in a way that a modern society needs. I've never been to the Davos meeting. Of course, CIS ran its own sort of version of it, but quite different. And the criticism it's had as being a detached elite and trying to tell everyone else what to do is partly correct. But it's a free society. People can do what they like. At least I think it still is. Are we better having it than not? Probably. But I think the criticism aimed at it probably fair.
Right. Christopher wants to know: is it harder to get support from businesses today than it was 20 or 30 years ago?
Look, individual, private businesses and so forth, run by families or individuals or whatever, have a more, what should we say, more capacity or more ability to help organisations directly. Larger corporations, some of their thinking about what organisations they support is very much focused on the bottom line. And what the judgment of a board or senior executives make about some issue which is contentious, say climate change or freedom of speech or whatever it happens to be, they probably would. The short answer is I think it is harder. Certainly harder for larger corporations to do it because there's so many other things in their way that make it difficult for them. People often think that CIS was a business-supported organisation. It's the smallest part of our support base.
Oh, really?
Individuals and foundations are the predominant part of the support base of CIS. Certainly was when I was there, and I'm sure it's the same now. Businesses themselves, they have different things they have to adhere to, and I think it's hard. Whereas back in 1978 or 79, the anti-socialist cause was the thing everyone was opposed to, so they would go. But socialism, the way it was then, we don't talk about much these days, so it's less of a thing. We go down to individual policies and you name it. So yeah, it's harder.
Well, I'll take that as a cue, actually, to do a second pitch, because I really do believe that individuals and individual memberships are really the foundation of an organization like the Center for Independent Study. So if you're not already a member, hear the plea. Please do become a member and become part of this debate. Become a contributor to Australia's policy debates. We have thanks coming in from Suresh and Adrian, who really appreciate your answers to their questions. Ben wants to ask you, can classical liberalism work in places like China, where the population of over 1 billion may constrain the way the nation operates?
Well, that is a big question, like the population. Look, I'm an optimist. There was a view that as China got richer, it would be more interested in democratic institutions and you name it. I'm missing something about the way the Chinese political system has worked following the liberalizations. It's also very centralized, and I think that liberal societies work better when they're decentralized, because closer to the people can see what your political institutions are doing or not doing. Which is why I think Australia has been, by and large, a successful liberal democratic society, because it's a federation. We're seeing some sort of unusual aspects of our federation at the moment as a result of the virus. But I think it's hard, but I don't think it's impossible. I think it will happen. But if anybody can pick what China's going to do in the next 5 years or 10 years, they're better at that than I am. So.
Let me.
Well, you've been talking about it. You tell me.
Well, you interview me over the next On Liberty. I'll give you my opinions about China. What do you think about India's liberalism? Because India, of course, is always the world's largest democracy. It's very much a robust democracy, but perhaps not as liberal as international critics would like.
India is an interesting and strange place in many ways. I've been there a few times. Don't forget, it's also it's a federation of sorts. So you can go from a communist-run state, as a Kerala or somewhere like one of them, or used to be, through to sort of very forward places like that are leading the world in technology and so forth. So they also play cricket, which I think is an important part of it. So I think India's got a good chance. At the moment, of course, the authorities have got a lot of things on their plate, and there are criticisms of the government. But if you can't criticise the government, what sort of free society are you? So my guess is they've got a good chance. They're very entrepreneurial, the Indian people, and just go and look through the universities in California and see how many Indians are doing high tech and you name it stuff there, and then go back to the places where they do it. And hopefully go back and make India, it's an very interesting and I think potentially great place.
Ben likes the idea of more localism and a federation of states in China. So he's going to take that away and who knows, maybe push for that change. Also, we have thank yous from listeners who are just happy to hear you on the show. We have Gay asking you about National Broadband Network. Now, she's commiserating with your internet troubles, but she says even with National Broadband Network, she has problems. Dropouts are a problem. Do you think satellite is the way to go instead of cabled broadband?
Well, you've got basically three types. I mean, we have cable of various kinds. Back to the old ADSL through to the modern fibre to this, that, and the other. In between them, we have the mobile broadband, and that is developing at a rate that the people who first dreamt up the NBN probably didn't appreciate. And then you get where we are at the farm. I mean, we do still have a place in Sydney, and we do have trouble with NBN down there too, I might say. But at the farm, we have to rely on the satellite, and it's we have tried other things when we first moved here before the satellite, and the satellite on the whole has been quite good, but it does have problems. So I think that mobile broadband is going to be the future, but that's just my view. Various types of cable, presumably. We just need to let the private sector get hold of it and fix it. So people don't, won't be forever complaining and so forth. And hopefully, maybe I'm just being a little bit Pollyanna-ish about this, but I think that's the way to go. And so mobile broadband will be the one that's going to get everyone excited. It already is.
Spartacus, and yes, it is Spartacus, points out that liberal societies are happier and more prosperous than others, yet none of Australia's major political parties stand for liberalism. Names notwithstanding. Would you agree with that there's no major political party in Australia that's truly a small L liberal party?
I think that's exactly right. one party or another may have policies that are more liberal. I mean, don't forget it was the Labor Party in the 80s that liberalised some of the economic institutions that have been so backward-looking and so stultified for all that era where I was growing up. So you'd have to say yes, the liberal impulse is alive and well, and the arguments that people used to persuade the government at the time that these things should be done were persuasive, and they did it. The government led by John Howard and others had certainly strong liberal components to it, and there were people, individually, so names notwithstanding, well, you know, there was a sort of a strong, dry, in the sense that Margaret Thatcher used to talk about it, a component of the Liberal Party in the early 80s going into, well, for a decade or more, and I think that was very, very, very influential, not only on the Liberal Party, but the Labor Party. I mean, CIS never, whilst, yes, people in politics were interested in what we were doing, we tended to try and, we talked about being detached from the supporters and so on. We're also trying to be detached from the political process, because if you consider an organisation has political interests and party political interests, then you've already put whatever percentage of the population offside anyway. So you've got to work on the ideas.
Right. Now, we'll be wrapping up in just a few minutes. So if you do have a final question, please get it in now. Christopher points out that the NBN is no better than the old Optus cable internet, but let's not. So there you go.
Yeah.
So don't worry, Greg, you're not missing out on too much. Stephen wants to ask about cancel culture. Now, this has become a perennial topic here. Cancel culture could impede a range of people. Do you think that that people may not want to be associated with the Center for Independent Studies because being associated with the Center for Independent Studies may be, you know, politically incorrect from a virtue signaling standpoint?
Well, you know, there's been people for years that don't want to be associated with the Centre for Independent Studies before anyone ever thought up cancel culture. They mostly because they didn't understand what the organisation was about and what it was trying to do. This cancel culture thing, I've sort of wondered if it was a phase, and I'm still persuaded it is a bit of a phase. I must confess I'm astonished. I mean, our colleague at CIS, Peter Kirk, he's the man who's been writing so much on this, and you know, he's the one to listen to because he's thorough, and it's. But it is an issue at the moment, and I wish it wasn't. I think it's making it difficult for people to. I mean, look, just today, the Film Academy in America decides the best picture's got to have other conditions to make sure it's the best picture. Well, for crying out loud, the best picture ought to be the best picture. You know, so it's how it's infected people. It's almost worse than it's a pandemic of. It's a social pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, cultural pandemic, which has to be, you know, people have to be sensitive about other people's feelings and all the rest of that. Yes, but you know, if you feel strongly about something, you've got to be out there and don't be afraid. And it is a problem for people because of employment, and you name it. But we know this, and I think we just got to keep at it and persuade people this is. There's no way to run our society.
Right. Now, we've got to start wrapping up, so I'm going to give you some rapid-fire questions before we end. First, Mayping Mango, do you give John Howard any credit for supporting the Hawke-Keating reforms?
Yes.
All right. Go on. No, elaborate a little.
No. I mean, he and the party, they're in opposition, they broadly supported those Liberal reforms, and so they should have. It wasn't returned so easily when they were in a position to do other things, when Labor wasn't supporting them. But, you know, that's politics.
If Anthony asks, if democracy depends on there being a civil society in which independent organizations proliferate, can China ever become a democracy when it doesn't have that kind of civil society?
That's an interesting question. Look, without knowing how it really works in China, my guess is that so many of the institutions of civil society that we would talk about are probably state sanctioned. And, you know, it's an interesting different tradition between the what I might call the Anglo tradition, if you like sort of United States, Australia, Britain, India, and so forth, where private small organisations spring up, then some of the others, like much of Europe too, has top-down approaches to the way things are organised. But can China change? I don't know. I hope so. My guess is on the ground. There's lots of various organisations that are doing stuff. Whether they're able to do it independently of the state is the question. I don't know.
All right, Gay wants to know what's next for Greg Lindsay.
Well, I've got to be selling some cows next week, and I was looking up the hill because it's raining out there. But my other little venture since I left CIS was to start an annual chamber music festival, and that's still going, except this year we can't perform publicly. So I'm determined to build that up. It's based in our farm, and we have Australia's top musicians come out, middle of nowhere, to perform chamber music.
All right. Well, anyone who is interested
in the ideas, I can assure you.
Anyone looking for a cow or some great music, keep an eye on that. This is our final question, Greg, coming from Spartacus again. Are you positive or negative on Australia's future?
I'm well, I was trying to qualify it slightly, but I won't. I'm positive. I think given what's happening at the moment, we're all learning a lot. I hope we find out what the lessons are, and then make certain if what's best in a society like ours. A free society is best. The institutions of liberty are best for creativity, for entrepreneurship, for creating wealth, and all the rest of it. There are others who, if we cannot get our economy functioning, close to what it was a year ago, then there's no way we can deal with the health crisis. We have to, and this is what politicians and other leaders, whether in business or wherever it happen to be, have got to think about, because we've got one of the best countries in the world. It's one of the true liberal democracies. Not as good as I'd like it, but it's better than most, and I want to keep it that way and improve on it. So I'm an optimist. I'm pathologically optimistic anyway. So there you go.
Well, I'll join you in that. Greg Lindsay, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Salvatore. It's lovely to be sort of involved, sort of. Thank you.
No, entirely our pleasure. I'd also like to thank our producer, Emily Holmes, executive producer, Max Hawk Weaver, the director of the Center for Independent Studies these days is Tom Switzer. Next week...
a great successor.
Yeah, next week on Liberty, we have Gene Tunney and Rationalizing Government Regulation. Please join us then. Thanks, everyone.